It also is a reality of the way in which we're treated differently in people in larger bodies, and the way in which we're often, feel like we're not worthy of various different things, or treated like we're not worthy of various different things because we're in larger bodies. And as spoiler alert, it's a romance, so there's a happily ever after. And at the end of the book, she has this kind of realization that all of the things, being queer, neurodiverse, and fat, all these things that she thought made her unable to find success, unable to find love, unable to find happiness, are actually the things that defined her ability to do that.
Today on Rainbow Country, Lauren Marie Fleming, a writer and writing coach, who's been featured on Good Morning America, Glamour, and Cosmo, joins me to talk about her debut rom-com queer novel, Because Fat Girl.
Hi, I'm writer Adam Smith, author of Deep Sniff, A History of Poppers and Queer Futures. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Lauren Marie Fleming, hi, how are you?
Hi, I am doing fabulous. How are you doing today?
I am well. I am well. Thank you for being here to have your voice, your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for this, especially to talk about your debut novel titled Because Fat Girl. That's the title, Because Fat Girl. And I want to start there. The title. There has to be a story behind choosing this particular title. I'm sure there is. And if there is, please share it.
There is, for sure. So I've been part of the body positive community for a really long time, especially the queer body positive community. And we use the phrase because fat girl in multiple different scenarios. The first being that I think is the most powerful is we use it in kind of an activist way, in a reclamation of the term fat, and of the way like, okay, yeah, I just ate a whole thing of fries because fat girl. I just had a doctor not take me seriously when I went in for a cold and they told me to lose weight because fat girl. And so it kind of incorporates what it means on all levels to be a fat person in society, from making kind of like a jovial fun about the cliches. I love fries with cheese, and I always joke, of course I love fries with cheese, I'm fat, right? Like, you're leaning into those stereotypes and joking about them and embracing them. And it also is a reality of the way in which we're treated differently in people in larger bodies, and the way in which we're often, feel like we're not worthy of various different things, or treated like we're not worthy of various different things because we're in larger bodies. And as spoiler alert, it's a romance, so there's a happily ever after. And at the end of the book, she has this kind of realization that all of the things, being queer, neurodiverse, and fat, all these things that she thought made her unable to find success, unable to find love, unable to find happiness, are actually the things that defined her ability to do that. They made her have community. They made her be more interesting and unique. And they were the reasons she wasn't doing this in spite of that. They were part of her and part of her excitement. And she made it there because fat girl. So it encompasses all this different variety of things and becomes a saying that can move you through multiple times in your life. And it comes from the body positive and fat community. So I appreciated reclaiming it as a title as well.
The, this is going to sound like an odd question, but is Because Fat Girl brat then?
You know what? That's so funny. I am old, and I don't know if I am too old for brat, but it is so brat. It is so brat.
I think it's brat.
Right? It's that same kind of idea of like, why am I so fabulous? Because I'm queer. Why am I paid less? Because I'm queer. Right? Like, it's that same kind of thing that I find it embodies. Like, it could easily be called Because Queer Girl as well, right? It's like, how do yeah, it's brat. It's totally brat.
So let's just jump right in. What is the story that you're telling within the pages of Because Fat Girl?
Yeah. So there is the story I'm telling at its core is a story about a woman who had some success in her career and was doing really great until cancer came and chopped off a limb of her family tree. Her brother dies of cancer, and that is my story. I felt like my career, my life was doing so great. And then my brother died of cancer. And she's trying to find herself again. What does it mean to be someone who's grieving? What does it mean to be someone who's, overcoming the heartache and trying to come out of that depth of despair to find out that her career died with her brother? And so she's trying to figure out who she is and what she wants to do with her life, who she wants to love, what she is, what she's doing. She gave up everything and moved in with her sister in the suburbs, and now she's trying to figure out what's next. And that's where we start the movie. We start the book is she is working at a high-end department store surrounded
Mm,
by celebrities, and that's the closest thing she has now to making movies. And she's always dreamt of making movies, and she's
mhm,
still working towards that dream. She just got detoured by grief. And I feel like that's something so many readers, early readers, are now responding to me. And so many readers are responding to this idea that they had this path in life and then something came and kind of shoved them off that path. And it's really hard to get back onto that path. So this is a story about getting back onto that path in life. And during that process, she, as a queer person who has only ever dated women in her life and non binary folk, it suddenly finds herself attracted to a cis man and unsure what to do with that. And I think that that's such an important story that we don't hear enough about. I think you get a lot of coming out stories where people realize that they're more like gay than they realized, but you don't have a lot of stories about people realizing that their sexuality might be more fluid in the other way. And as somebody who dates a lot of, has dated trans men and has dated people of all different kinds of genders, I thought it was important to kind of explore that personally. So it follows her as she falls in love with this character, and it's the complete opposite of who she ever thought she'd fall in love with. And her life just turns into something different, and what it looks like to see her fighting her path instead of embracing the path and like learning to love herself in that process of it.
mm.
And then there's a group of diverse friends, all of them from various different backgrounds, that are coming together to make a movie. So I always say that the true love story is between Diana and her friends, and they're falling in
Mm.
love with this process. They're unwilling to go forward without everybody coming along, and they're unwilling to do this with their values compromised. And it shows them working hard to make it in Hollywood.
Okay, so quote, I've grown up belittled for my weight, bullied for being gay, and generally miserable in my body, unquote. That's from your novel, Because Fat Girl. They often say, write what you know. Write what you know. Is this novel in part autobiographical? Is this novel maybe partly a memoir?
Yeah, I joke that it's this is a memoir where I wrote the ending that I wanted, which which was I get to make a movie together with a bunch of famous cool people and all my friends. Yeah, it has somebody whose brother died, and she lives with her sister and is raising her two the kids with her sister. It is about somebody who grew up. I grew up in a small rural farming town on the Mexican border, and it was not always an easy place to be queer. And it was the kind of place where they accepted me, but we're not okay with my life choices, right?
Mm-hmm,
Like
mm-hmm,
we love the sinner but hate the
mm-hmm,
sin.
mm-hmm,
And I was, very lucky that my dad didn't really know what to do with me as a kid, with a gay kid. I was out at 12, and my mom was luckily would like drive me to San Diego and take me to the gay parts of town. Not overtly, but like get me a gay hairdresser to like show she was cool with it. Um, and so I was very lucky that I had this insular situation in which I didn't have to worry about physical harm, but
mm,
I definitely had some pretty intense bullying. I lost friends. I had a lot of, Bible beating people that would, we tried to start a P flag in our county,
mm,
and the whole county came against it, but we would have church groups proselytizing about how bad we were at school lunch, right? Like I grew up in California, but it might as well have been the Bible beating South. And
mm,
so it absolutely talks about, I remember there was a kid who was bullying me at school, and the answer was like, well, maybe you shouldn't be fat. Maybe you should lose weight. Like maybe that's a good incentive for you to lose weight. Is this kid who's like treating you like shit every single day and making it really hard for you to go to school? And I think that things have come a long way. I know kids that are in my hometown now they don't put up with bullying, and my nibblings are out and queer, and it's amazing and beautiful to see. And I think that it's also really hard a lot of places. And so I wanted to have a book. There is a really big part of this book where a young queer kid has somebody stand up for them. And I like to write the stories in the world that I want existing. It isn't separate from homophobia or transphobia or the oppression that we experience, but it shows people standing up for other people and not putting up with that. And it shows people accepting other people in the way that like it could be. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And it's something I needed as a kid. And I think also there's a little homage, like the cover has the trans flag on it. Like as a genderqueer person with lots of trans friends, I wanted a little bit of like a trans homage also. And there are trans characters that like have love and have lives in the book. And I just think it's so important to show the whole LGBTQIA plus spectrum finding love and joy. And I hope that this book helps people like me who it took, I didn't get a queer book when I was a kid, but I remember going into a bookstore and coming across a queer book as a teen and just feeling so seen, so heard. Like I always say it was Flaming Iguanas by Erica Oliveras, I think is her last name. And I remember being like, I don't know why I'm so attracted to these leather wearing women that ride motorcycles, but something about them is really exciting to me.
Would
And
that be Dykes on Bikes?
oh my God, yes. And it was the beginning of I'm just putting this out there. I still haven't gotten to ride behind somebody on a Dykes on Bikes in the part of the parade. So if anybody out there hears that, I want to ride on the back of a Dykes on Bikes. Lifelong dream
Oh.
still not accomplished. But yeah, like books were the beginning of my understanding of
Mhm.
not just my queerness, but my active involvement in the BDSM community, of my non-binariness, like of the difference between femme and woman. So I'm hoping that my book can not only showcase that for queer people, but also help allies see themselves in the situations in which people need an ally and the people around them step up and be an ally.
Is it true that it took you 20 years to write this book?
So it took me 20 years to get a book deal. I started my first novel at um,
That's what, Body Love?
so my first novel was actually about a group of lesbian assassins
Hmm.
fronting as a book club. And my first novel, I started 20 years ago this October. So my book will come out 20 years, almost to the like week that I started my first novel. And in the past, 13 years, I have been actively trying to get a book deal. And I have faced so much rejection. And a lot of it is like thinly veiled homophobia and then
Wow.
some thinly veiled fat phobia. And I think I always have to give a shout out to the Casey McQuiston success of Red, White, and Royal Blue, and Alison Cochrane, and some of the people, Becky Albertalli, some of these people who have come before me, Garth Greenwell. There are so many people who've come before me and kind of opened doors that were slammed in my face before. And I have actively tried to get a book deal for this book for 7 years, and for books in general for 12. And I've gone all the way to the publishers, and they loved the book, and then the marketing and sales teams wouldn't buy it. And so for anybody out there who's still struggling, know that one, it's gotten a little bit better in the industry. So keep putting yourself out there. And two, there are people within the industry that are working so hard to make it more diverse, and know that you have allies in it, and like keep putting yourself out there. It took me 20 years, and now watch me grow, right? Watch me take off.
Hmm. There's also an audiobook component. Were you involved in that aspect at all?
Oh yeah, I read the audiobook, which was what
Oh, okay.
I always wanted to do in my whole life. I
Hmm.
remember I got into audiobooks as a kid, and I'm a huge audiobook junkie. I listen to probably 50 audiobooks a year. I love Libro.fm. They are a really fabulous company that allows you to get an audiobook and support your local bookstore of choosing. And so I devour audiobooks. And so I was pretty adamant that I wanted to read the book.
Hmm.
And I had some training. I've done some radio stuff. I had some training. I was like, I can do this. I can do this. And then I get into the office. I get into the studio, and I'm like, oh my God, this is really hard. This is so hard. What was I thinking? I talk all the time. I can talk all day. This is different. This is hard. And it took a lot of training of my voice and it took a lot of patience, but we ended up doing a great job. I had an amazing sound engineer who's also an audiobook engineer herself, and I recorded the audiobook, and I'm very, very excited about that. And I feel like I don't need to record all of my audiobooks, but this particular one, since it's so memoiristic and it's so based on my own voice and my own life, I felt like it was appropriate for me to read it. And I had fun.
Mm.
I apologize ahead of time for my accents. I am not an accent person. I should have practiced a little bit more, but the rest of it, I think, early listens, it sounds really, really great. I'm so glad that I got to read it.
So, Lauren Marie Fleming, you're a writer, you're a writing coach. You help people discover their authentic story and tell that story to the world. Who helped you discover your story, to tell your story? Was there an individual or people or what?
Yeah, I think, not to be too big of a massive gay cliche, but I'm going to shout out my English teacher and my theater teachers,
Mm.
right? I think that I found my voice through Dr. Kurgan, Mr. Kurgan, my English teacher, who was the kind of man who lived in a small rural town during the school year and then New York City and went to plays during any vacation he had. And was a very effeminate man. I have no idea if he was gay or not, but he definitely had the I'm here to support you little gay kid vibes, and definitely was a safe haven for me in high school. I had some other really great teachers too, but he was the one that challenged me to think creatively and think beyond. He introduced me to films, he introduced me to theater, he introduced me to so much creativity and culture, and that helped me to find my own voice by hearing other people's voices. He introduced me to voices I probably never would have heard if not for his influence in my life. And then I had Mrs. McGraw was my drama teacher freshman year, who I wasn't supposed to be in drama, weren't as a freshman allowed to, but I was already struggling so much that she made a space for a freshman kid to join when we weren't supposed to in the school. Like, she advocated to the school to let me in drama, and that saved me. And then Rosemary Woods and Patricia Sirocco were two people who started a community theater when I was a teen and pulled me in, especially Rosemary Woods pulled me in and reminded me that there were safe places out in the world for gay kids and that I would be okay and that I could pursue the arts and I could use my voice. And they gave me positions like I was a choreographer. I didn't know how to choreograph. They let me try whatever I wanted and find my voice that way. They let me help direct. They let me help do things. And I think that I grew up in a very small, impoverished little town. And yet there were these people who were doing beautiful things and were highly resourced by passionate people at the time I was there. And I'm forever grateful for those people in high school that kept me alive, really. I was absolutely the kid that was like self-harming and struggling so hard to be a little queer kid in this super religious town. And they were the ones that helped me know that there was a world beyond me and that there was power in telling my story and there was power in other people's stories.
Mm. Wow, well said. Well said. You just mentioned the word queer for yourself and being part of the LGBT community and being a queer individual for yourself. When did that start happening for you? When did this journey start for you? When did you start recognizing, the gay aspect of yourself? When did that start crystallizing in your mind for you growing up?
Yeah, I I always, whenever people ask that, I always think of this photo of me in this like rainbow head, like full head to toe rainbow gear. That's like this jumpsuit with my chest open and I'm like posing. And it is the gayest photo I've ever taken. And I've taken some really gay photos in my life, y'all. I'm a like gay cliche all the time. And I just think about how there was always something about me that I knew was different.
Mm.
Just always something about me that I knew was different. And
Innately.
innately, right? And I
Hmm.
don't think think it has to be that way. I think that there are so many people who don't understand that part of themselves until later in life. And I don't think there's
Mm-hmm.
anything better or worse of when you come out, but I understood it very early on.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was in sixth grade and I was with a group of guy friends and they were explaining things they were interested in trying with girls. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that too. And they're like, you know, most girls don't. I was like, wait, like other girls don't want to do that to other girls? Okay, then I'm gay. If that's what you call me. And so, I mean, I called myself bi for years and I dated some guys. It just wasn't really necessarily what I was interested in. And then I took off to San Francisco and was, in the heart of San Francisco in the gayest of gay times. And when there was still like a huge queer women population on Valencia Street. And I was so lucky to be, I always thought the heyday of San Francisco was over when I was living it. But then I look back and I'm like, oh my God, we had the Lexington, we had Fairy Butch, we had these amazing stories of like, we were the beginning of queer porn happening in that time. Like it was an amazing Renaissance time to be a queer woman in San Francisco, and I'm so lucky that that coming out happened within such an amazing community that was body positive, that was kind, was open, that was kinky and queer and fun. And I think that's when my like real understanding of the variety of the full spectrum of the rainbow came from, and I could pick and choose, and I didn't have to be one particular type of gay. So I think I realized early on just how gay I was, but I don't think I really understood my gender identity and my kink identity and my like role in the world until got to play around in those different roles in San Francisco.
Wow. Sounds like a real awakening. Like really coming into, I mean, it sounds like you've always known who you are, but then, you know, discovering that community.
I think that there's something about I think there's something about peeling off the layers of ourselves.
Mm,
I think I always knew who I wanted to be and where I was headed. And I think every ideation of me was the me in that moment, right? Like it wasn't any less me any of those times. But I do feel like there were moments when I was a part of community that allowed me to explore myself. And that was beautiful. And one of the things I'm trying to do with this book, because Fat Girl, is show that is less about queerness is less about a box, a binary choosing. If I'm like, I've had so many people be like, well, are you lesbian? Are you bi? Are you what? And I'm like, I'm queer because every aspect of my life is different than the heterosexual normative. And so I feel like I've been so lucky in my life. And it's interesting because it could be seen as unlucky because I was like growing up not getting to experience any of this and feeling like all of the everything my friends got, the like boyfriends and the girlfriends and the time and that I didn't get any of that in high school.
mm,
So then I get to college and I'm like, I'm having it all, folks. Take me to every single thing. If it has
mm,
a rainbow on it, it does. And I think there's a beautiful I hesitate. I think this book shows my own personal hesitation to make us stick to labels too hard. And this is what I love about the like gender queerness and the non-binariness and the exploration that's happening, especially in this younger generation, is we're less inclined to make ourselves pick a box and stay in it forever. And we're allowed to understand that our lives are fluid, our sexuality is fluid, our identities are often fluid and they change and they change by the day some days for me, whether I'm feeling more butch or femme. And I think that I'm so lucky that I've been able to have the courage because it wasn't handed to me by any means. Like it was, in fact, the opposite was told to me.
mm.
But I've been so lucky to be a part of communities that have allowed me to explore and given me safe spaces to explore.
I want to ask you, I want to get your opinion on something, which is something that I'm not necessarily struggling with, but trying to understand and get a wide perspective, a wide range of opinions on, and it's being gender non-binary. For me, I'm gay, I'm androgynous, I am androgyny, I am a mix of both male and female energies. That's who I am. When I hear someone say that they are gender non-binary and they say that they are neither male nor female, that's telling me who you are not. It's not necessarily telling me who you are or how you identify. It's telling me what you are not, how you don't want to identify. So for yourself, how do you see this? Because it's such a new term and it's used and adopted so many times that I'm starting to ask this question, like, what does it mean to be gender non-binary? And for yourself, how do you see this? If someone says that they are neither A nor B, they're neither male nor female, then how do you identify yourself? Do you see what I'm asking? And what's your take?
My take is actually, I sometimes default to the term non-binary because it's so much more understandable to straight people. But
Hmm.
within my communities, I call myself genderqueer because
Hmm.
I think that in the same way that my queerness is, identified as bisexual for a really long time because I had slept with men in high school and was now sleeping with women, and I thought, okay, I'm bi. And then I realized I didn't really want to be with men again, so I called myself a lesbian. And then I started dating non-binary people, and so then I was queer, and then it was da 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 da. And I feel like similarly to non-binary, it says in the name binary, right? I think you bring up such a great point. It isn't saying what it is, it's saying what it isn't. And it's also then reinforcing that there could be a binary. So I personally like gender queer, and I
Hmm.
like queer in all aspects. I think
Hmm.
queer for me again means that I'm different than the heteronorm.
Hmm.
I'm kinky. I'm an active part of the BDSM community. My gender is not, cis, and
Hmm.
and even that, right? Like my gender is not cis. So for me, I don't.
And gender is a construct. It's something that humans have created. I mean, you don't see animals like, dressed up as, feminine or masculine. Although there are peacocks and
I was just
you know,
thinking about peacocks.
the men are more colorful.
Right? It's always so funny to me because I think the example I always think about is like, oh, gender is in nature, but men tend to be the ones performing and preening. So maybe men should
Hmm.
be more natural and start wearing more fabulous dresses and outfits and colors and dress like drag queens. Like drag queens are the closest to peacocks we're gonna have. So, right? I think for me, it's like, so I ask this question a lot, is gender a construct? Or And if gender is a construct, is it bad that we're constructing our gender? Like today, I am wearing makeup and my hair is curly and I have earrings on and lipstick and a cute little femme outfit. Am I a different person on the days I dress more masculine? I don't perform gender. And if
Hmm.
gender is a construct and a performance, then what do I say to my trans friends that are like loving leaning into the performance of the gender that identifies most with them?
Hmm.
And so I don't really know the answer to any of this, but I think that's what's so cool about it is
Hmm.
we are in a world where we get to, for lack of a better way, and I'm sorry if I can't cuss, but like fuck around and find out. I think for me, I love the fluidity of gender. And so for me,
Hmm.
gender fluid, gender queer
Hmm.
works better. And I don't actually like non-binary, but I'm never going to tell somebody you don't get to call yourself that, right? Like just because I might not like that term. And I think that it's so hard because we are fighting so hard for our right to exist right now.
Hmm.
And so we want these languages and terms that we can tell straight people so they can be our better allies by using the right language. And then
Hmm.
we are recreating our own languages. And we're just
Hmm.
so under attack right now. We can get almost defensive over terminology.
Hmm.
And I think that that can be really important if someone's misgendering somebody or doing it harmfully. But for me within our community, I think the exploration is the reason I'm queer. If I can't keep exploring, if I can't change tomorrow what I want to be and who I want to do, and then did I really win, right? Am I living the life I want to live? So I don't know if I answered your question, but for me, queerness is inherently playful and inherently creative and inherently explorative and inherently allowing ourselves to embrace differences. And I love that about us. Like, I love that. That's my favorite part of it. And so, yeah, I like the fluidity of it. And I'm not a personal fan of the term non-binary because I think it, again, it's just like talks about binaries, but also I will be the first to say, hell yes, be a non-binary person, right? Like, I think that
Mm-hmm.
people, my take on labels is give us 200,000 labels if we have to. I'm a writer. Just give me the words that you want me to use, and I can change it tomorrow if you want to change your words. And that's kind of my take on sexuality, too.
You are the founder of School for Writers. What is School for Writers?
School for Writers is my company that I started in 2020, right before the pandemic. I quit my job. And at first I was like, oh God, what did I do? And then second, I was like, well, everyone's stuck inside. This is a great time to start a school to help people write their books. And I saw a diversity in publishing um, study that made me furious. The lack of diversity in publishing made me furious. I would go into
Mm.
bookstores and I would have read all the lesbian books they had there. And I was so angry about it all. And I would yell and yell and talk to my friends. I was like, well, screw it. I'm going to help people write their books. I'm going to change this. The number one way you can change the diversity of publishing is helping more diverse voices tell their stories. And
Mm.
so I created this company and we've done really well. And we help a lot of people get their stories out and feel more able to tell their stories. Our flagship program is called Write Your Friggin' Book Already, but we also have podcasts and freebies and courses and so much support. And then for established creatives, we have some programs to help them build resilience, overcome rejection, and get themselves out there and make money even because we live in capitalism. We can't keep being artists if we aren't able to sell our art. You can be a hobbyist artist for sure, but so many of my friends weren't able to pay their bills. So we talk about marketing, we talk about money, we talk about everything. And the goal is to help diverse storytellers thrive so we can have more books on the shelves and eventually movies out in the world and media. And so we can have our stories out there. So I started the company with the goal in mind of supporting people in telling their stories because I think that the world needs our stories now more than ever.
So you've been featured on Good Morning America, on Glamour, on Cosmo. You've written what, over 2 books? Here's my
I've
last.
published 2 books. I've written 13. That Girl's my 13th book, which I find that interesting that my 13th book is the one that got published.
So here's my last question for you. What do you hope your audiences come away with after they've experienced, they've read one of your books, they've heard the audiobook, maybe they've been part of your writing coaching. What do you hope your audiences come away with after they've experienced Lauren Marie Fleming?
So in my living room, I have a whiteboard that has my legacy written on it. So I'm reminded of it consistently. And it has 3 parts to it. The first part is me telling my stories. I want to be out there actively telling empathetic and empowering stories. The second part is you, the people that I interact with, the people that I talk to. I want to help you be out there telling more empathetic and empowering stories. And the third part is us, the community. I want my work to have a ripple effect that helps people that will never even meet me or read one of my books to tell more empathetic and empowering stories. And so I want people to read this book. And you will see at the end of Because Fat Girl, even in the acknowledgments, I say this like the thing that I want the most from this book is I want people to go out and tell their own stories. I want them to grab their phone and make a movie with friends. I want them to produce a play in their community. I want them to paint or art or do art or art or do art or write their book or whatever helps get their stories out there because creativity is how we creativity is how we define ourselves as humans. It defines our humanity. We literally the animals that are closest to us are those that create, that make things. And so if I can encourage people to make more space in their life for creativity, make more space in their life for empathy, and feel more empowered, I've done my job here on the planet while I'm here. And I hope that people read my book, Body Love, 10 Steps to Profoundly Loving Your Body, and love their body more, feel more empathetic and empowered in their body. And I hope people read Because Fat Girl and feel more empathetic towards others, empathetic towards themselves, and empowered and empowering others.
Wow, well said, well said. Lauren Marie Fleming, well said, well done, well written. Thanks for your time. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor. This is a great conversation. Thank you.